Okay everybody, welcome back to another episode of Surrounded by Bourbon with me, Phil Crawford, aka Causeway Whisky. This is episode 25. We are in Campbeltown on the west coast of Scotland and we are looking at Springbank 10 years old. So yeah, 10-year-old single malt from Campbeltown. I would assume that anybody who is really enthusiastic about whiskey, that Springbank really needs no introduction. It really is probably one of the darlings of the Scotch whiskey world and a brand that people who flip whiskey live for, even ahead of Macallan. You know, as appreciation and hype grew over Springbank over the last few years, they kind of reached a zenith or a low, depending on where you stand, during the COVID years. Springbank literally became the holy grail of whiskey for not only consumers, but also for those who were flipping bottles at auctions. And anything that had Springbank on the label was hoovered up as we indulged in online shopping, and most of it sadly ended up on auction sites at vastly inflated prices. The local barley range especially, and anything that came from the very famous Springbank cage, literally could sell for anything that was between 5 and 10 times the retail price. I know that it is a free market economy, but you know, the use of bots to hoover up online sales, and then the lack of bottles that were actually going to people who drank them and who were enthusiastic about the distillery and didn't just see it as a means of making money, it was kind of soul destroying for quite a period of time. Even worse than that was the fact then that retailers also got in on the act. There were many retailers who saw the secondary prices at auction and just decided that they would inflate their prices. You know, it wasn't unusual to see a bottle of Springbank 10-year-old that should have been marketed for like £55 sterling to be 120, 150 pounds online, just because they knew that there was so much demand that they would sell for that price. And even then, there was a good chance that those bottles may have ended up at auction because people just wanted to try and make a little bit extra. And it was kind of weird at that time because those regular Springbank consumers were kind of in a position where it was actually sometimes even easier to find a bottle of Springbank here in the US than it was to find it in the UK, Ireland, or mainland Europe. Even things such as the often overlooked triple distilled Hazelburn that comes from Springbank Distillery, that wouldn't even sit on shelves. That was usually the last bottle to sell, and just during the COVID era you couldn't even pick that up. There was just so much demand. It was kind of crazy times. I ended up in a very fortunate position that my local off-license in Quarian, Fairley's Wines, had a very good relationship with Springbank's parent company, J&A Mitchell & Co, and they kind of had access to pretty much every release. You may be wondering how. Well, part of that is because they were one of the retailers that actually didn't, as we would say in Ireland, stick the arm in and try and make as much money from Springbank as possible. So they were actually selling to local people that they knew who were actually drinking this and not flipping it as best as they reasonably could. So they kind of vetted the people who were actually buying these things. Because of the unscrupulous action of some online retailers, actually J&A Mitchell were actually removing people from their distribution list as online retailers and so on if they noticed that you were selling whiskey above the RRP or wildly above the RRP. So yeah, because Fairley's didn't do that, because they made sure that it kind of got into the hands of people like myself that actually like to drink this stuff, they managed to get pretty much every release that was going, and local drinkers were rewarded for their loyalty. So not a bad concept, you know, imagine rewarding a bit of loyalty. Anyway, let's get on to the whiskey itself. So Springbank make 3 styles of whiskey. They have a heavily peated, double distilled, which is long row. Then we have Springbank, this is the flagship of the distillery, which is 2.5 times distilled, and I'll get into that in maybe a different video with like the 15 or something. This is lightly peated, light to medium peat, and then they have the triple distilled, which is fairly unusual for Scotland, Hazelburn range, and that is generally unpeated. But yeah, the Springbank is really the one that people kind of go after. It's a single malt, it is 46% ABV, it is non-chill filtered, it is natural colour. So again, we are hitting all the good points that whiskey enthusiasts want to see in their liquid of choice. This particular release is from July 2022. So every year there's quite a few different releases of the 10-year-old. I think in 2022, I would need to check Whiskey Base, but I think there was maybe 5 releases of the 10-year-old. And even that doesn't see it demand. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? So this particular one is matured, is a vatting of maturations. So 60% of the liquid has been matured in bourbon casks for 10 years or more, and 40% have been matured in sherry casks, and then they've been vatted together. This cost me the princely sum back in 2022 of £50.75, so $70, or €58.50. I am starting to see this come back on the shelves here in Florida, weirdly. So there are a few Total Wines and ABCs and things like that that are stocking this again, although it is $100 a bottle now, so a bit of a markup. The last bottle of this that I got was a 2024 that's still waiting for me at home, and I paid £55, so about $77. So there is a bit of an uplift for getting it over here. So let's see, would it be worth investigating if you were buying it here in Florida. Anyway, let's get on to the nose. So first of all, there's farmyard. I know that's a weird expression to use, but just think of hay, of a midden where you have a bit of manure going on and silage and things like that. There's dunnage warehouse, there's a diesel engine, so it's a bit dirty, it's a bit farmyardy, there's a bit of lactic kind of notes going on as well, like sour cream. Maybe I'm not selling this to you quite yet, but believe me, it gets better. Now we're getting a little bit of varnish and then toffee sauce. And then it just becomes a fruit bomb. So we're getting ripe apricots, we're getting fresh peach, there's melon in here. There's papaya going on as well. You can definitely smell the cereal, the malted barley, a bit of vanilla extract. There's a light peatiness to this one. It's definitely not the dirtiest Springbank that I've ever nosed before. On the fruit note again, there's now tinned pineapples, and then there's a little bit of minerality, kind of a bit like slate, like wet slate. So all in all, a very engaging nose, and it is one of the calling cards of Springbank and Campbeltown whiskies in general, is they're just a little bit unusual compared to even the medicinal Islas or maybe some of the peated Highlands that are maybe a bit more heathery. These have their own thing going on. So mouth or palate, let's go on to the palate. So texture wise, It's kind of like a bit of a medium mouthfeel. It's not super oily compared to like maybe the cask strength editions of Springbank, but there's decent legs in the glass, and you know, I mean, it definitely coats your mouth well. The first thing I noticed from that first sip is just again how much tropical fruit comes through. Juicy fruit gum. There's pineapple, there's peach, honeydew melon, that papaya again. There's now an element of menthol, and actually the peatiness is a little more prevalent on the palate than it is on the nose. But the peat gives way to like vanilla custard, and then some like dusty oak as well, so sort of like oak shavings. There's a little bit of pepperiness in here, some old leather, slightly salty, just loads going on. Interesting dram. Finish wise then. So it's kind of medium in length with that tropical fruit just running through the whole thing again. A light peppery character, actually kind of like rocket or arugula as it is here in America. It's like peppery and herbal at the same time. And then just the gentlest of peat smoke that's just like pervading the whole thing. Very nice dram. Scores, how am I going to score this? So I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. Why? So the last time that I reviewed Springbank 10 was actually a 2021 release, and I scored that a 9 out of 10, and I will put the link to that in the description and to my website. That 2021 release that I had was just an incredible whiskey for the money. It was so complex, there was so much going on. This one doesn't quite live up to the magic of that last 10-year-old that I had. It's still a very, very good dram. I would always recommend, if you can, to try and get a bottle of Springbank 10. Even at the $100 price here that it is in Florida, highly recommended. Genuinely, of the core range of Springbanks, the 10-year-old is probably my favourite alongside the 12-year-old cask strength. But one of the reasons why Springbank is so endearing is the fact that because it is a handmade whiskey from beginning to end, from the floor malting to the distillation, there's not a computer in sight, bottles are filled by hand, labels are put on by hand. It is wildly inconsistent. Maybe wildly inconsistent is a terrible thing to say. It's inconsistent. But that's part of the beauty of Springbank, is that you kind of always want to like compare to different expressions that you've had in the past, even if it's within the 10-year-olds. You know, there'll be standouts. So as I say, like the 2021 for me was unbelievable. This one just doesn't quite hit the heights, but it's still an excellent whiskey in its own regard. You know, if it wasn't for the fact that whiskey was inconsistent, people wouldn't watch YouTube reviews, they wouldn't read things like Dramface or Malt Review or even my own whiskey website, for those that are interested. So yeah, and I know I'm pretty lucky to even have a bottle of this because it's been so rare to get. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Springbank 10. I do have the 12, the 15 and the local barley up there as well, and also the latest 10-year-old sherry cask release, which I think was the Amontillado, as a cask strength 55%, so I do intend to getting around to reviewing those as well. But yeah, definitely look at the Springbank 10. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Definitely worth the investment. And considering that, you know, people especially over here, I think people are quite happy to spend maybe like $85 on like a Glenlivet 15 or a Glenfiddich 15 or even like a Macallan 12. Honestly, do yourself a favor, spend the extra money, try this out. I know it's not for everybody, it's definitely a unique experience, but it's one that I think will maybe open your eyes a little bit if you've never veered into Campbeltown territory. Anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. Sorry for my Indian ramblings at the end there. Please like, subscribe, please comment. If you would like to, please support the channel through the Buy Me a Coffee link that I have in the description as well. And please join me for the next episode when we will be drinking something American. So whatever you're doing for the rest of the night, have a good one, and I will see you again. Slàinte.